When the president spoke last week, um, did he did he have any solid ground on which to stand in what he said about churches and saying I can tell any state and any church anywhere you can open, regardless of what your state leaders are saying?
So if that's what he wishes to say, he may certainly do so. But in terms of actually having the power to countermand, if you will, a governor's or a state's order to not have in-person religious services, he has no such power. The police power is something that exists in individual states. The 10th Amendment says that any power that's not given to the national government is reserved to the states. And that's one of the powers, the police power, that was not given to the national government.
So what about free exercise of religion?
The free exercise clause essentially means that the government needs to stay out of religion and doesn't need to be telling people how to worship. That's the one that's most implicated these days, because a number of pastors and a number of very sincere believers think that the restrictions that are placed on, especially on in-person meetings at churches, violate their right to freely exercise their religion. Boy, they've got a point, don't they?
But Harris said it isn't quite that simple.
When you talk about free exercise, the general rule is this, is that if the government is enforcing a law that's neutral, that is, it's not aimed at any particular religion, and is generally applicable, everybody has to obey it. Well, then religion does not get any special exception.
Then there's that whole close proximity thing.
Communion with other people in your congregation is an essential part of this. You might turn to the person next to you at a certain point in the service and pass the peace with them and shake hands, and that's a very important part. And then, of course, there's communion itself, which is often done communally. That is, you go up and you might even drink from the same chalice. Lots and lots of close physical contact, and that's an important part of all this. Of course, singing. The unfortunate thing is that all of those activities, they spread COVID-19, the coronavirus. So that's why, in my humble opinion, that these restrictions are in all likelihood constitutional in most cases, as an exercise of the police power. So President Trump may say whatever he wishes, but to a great extent, he's just shouting into the wind. Now, here's the caveat. People take their cues from him. And so the fact that he's saying these things will probably embolden a number of very well-intentioned, I'm sure, ministers and preachers and others all around the nation to go ahead and do what they want to do, which is have their in-person services, because after all, the president said I could. Now, even though the president's word had no legal effect, and these people can still be cited or arrested for doing this, they're probably much more likely to go forward.
It's a fine line, though. How far is too far?
And it's only when the state missteps a bit that it can bump up against either the Constitution or some related statutes. For example, drive-in church services. Why not? Right? I mean, we all go to Walmart or the grocery store, and we park right next to somebody else, and we see each other in the parking lot. Why not let a church have a bunch of cars in the parking lot, look at the pastor up on the church porch, perhaps with a speaker system or maybe a local FM transmitter, which I understand some churches are doing? Well, when certain municipalities tried to prohibit that, I think it was Louisville, Kentucky, and maybe Chattanooga, Tennessee, and maybe someplace else nearby. Well, now you no longer look like you're being neutral. You look like you're singling out churches, and you can't do that. You can't single out religion and hold it to a higher standard than you do Walmart or the Sonic drive-in or whatever else. And so I think occasionally these regulations can be over the top and go too far, and at least one federal judge has said so, and other municipalities have backed off when they've been challenged in this regard, which is appropriate. I mean, you've got to, when you exercise any governmental power, you can't act arbitrarily, you can't be capricious, you've got to exercise that power in a reasonable fashion, and sometimes it doesn't happen.